إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد, we start in the name of Allah the Most High, the one to whom belongs all praise, the one who controls all affairs, the one who gives, the one who takes, glorified and exalted is He. And we send peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam and his family and his followers until the end of time. Ameen. One of the unique and amazing things about human beings is our desire and our ability to express ourselves. Obviously, if we look at other types of creation from the animal kingdom, we can see different types of expression, different types of communication. But we don't see the same level and the same sophistication of communication that we see with human beings. And as all of us know from our own personal human life, from our own personal lives, part of our communication is not just that we get it off of our chest or we say what we want to say, but a big part is actually us being heard. And one of the things that comes to mind for myself, and I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences, is that sometimes, my son will come, he's about 4.5 now, and he'll come and he'll say, Baba, 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 and he's trying to get my attention. Finally, he'll get my attention and he'll start saying something. Baba, and then he starts to slow down a little bit, and he gets this look on his face like he actually didn't have anything to say. He didn't actually have something that he wanted to say, but he just wanted to get my attention so that he could start talking and be heard, even if he doesn't really have anything to say. And this to me is, part of this indication that sometimes we just want to be heard. And this plays out in a whole lot of different areas of our lives. So many times we might be talking to someone else, and we know they're there, but we're not really sure they're there. Physically they're there, but I can't really tell. Do you hear what I'm saying to you or not? And many of the problems that we have on our family levels, on our parenting levels, spouse to husband to wife, wife to husband, families with parents, how we deal with our parents, how we deal with our communities, a lot of these issues revolve around this. There's something's being said, whether that's verbally or otherwise, but it's not always being heard. And one of the beautiful things about the life of the Prophet ﷺ is that you see very clearly that the Prophet ﷺ heard people. And he heard them in really, really deep ways. But before we get to any of that, and we've talked about some of that in the past, we need to talk about where it all starts. And where it all starts with an understanding is with the understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears us. From Muslim theology, one of the most foundational beliefs that we have is that from the attributes that we describe Allah with is the attribute of hearing. We say that Allah is necessarily existent, that He is without beginning, that He is without end, that He is without need for anything in creation, that He is without any similarity to anything in creation, and He is completely without parts, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then after all of those negations, we eventually make some affirmations. And we say that Allah is living, that Allah has knowledge, that He has power, that He has will, and that He has hearing. In the sense, it's different. We already said it's entirely dissimilar from our hearing, but He has hearing. And He has sight, different from our sight. Because we have this in the Quran that it's established by the text. That He is as-Sami', that He is al-Alim, that He is al-Basir, that He is the one who hears all things, He is the one who knows all things. He is the one who sees all things, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have many different stories like this in the Quran. The most prominent of them is the story of the woman who came to the Prophet ﷺ and she was complaining that her husband had done dihar to her. And dihar, in the context of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, is when a man tells a woman, "You are like my mother's back to me," which means that I have nothing to do with you. And this was a particular type of estrangement that was used in that time. And so she comes to the Prophet ﷺ and she asks him, "Is there any solution to this? Is there any way we can get out of this? I mean, he said this to me, but we still love one another. We still get along. We still want to be together." And the Prophet ﷺ told her that, "I don't know of anything." Right? And a little bit of time passes and revelation comes. Surah Al-Mujadila, or Mujadila, and different narrations. So the narration comes and says, قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا وَتَشْتَكِي إِلَى اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ يَسْمَعُ تَحَاوُرَكُمَا. She said, the verse says, Allah has heard the woman who came to you to complain about her situation with her husband, and Allah heard your conversation. Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, Subhanallah. When she talks about this story, she says, Subhanallah. I was in the house, and they were speaking so quietly that I couldn't hear their conversation. And of course, Allah is the one who heard their conversation, and then Allah responds to the situation, telling them what the ruling is. How do you get out of this, right? In other places in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, will say, مَا يَكُونُ مِن نَجْوَى ثَلَاثَةٍ إِلَّا هُوَ رَابِعُهُمْ. That there's no conversation between three people except that he is the fourth. وَلَا خَمْسَةٍ إِلَّا هُوَ سَادِسُهُمْ. And no five except that he is the sixth. وَهُوَ مَعَهُمْ أَيْنَمَا كَانُوا. And he is with them wherever they are. In other verses, هُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He is with you wherever you might be. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is hearing. And we can look at this from two different sides. One side is the side of we should be aware of ourselves. As it says in Surah Qaf, مَا يَلْفِظُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ إِلَّا لَدَيْهِ رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ. That the person does not say any statement except that there is a scribe that is writing that statement down. And that Allah has knowledge of every single thing that occurs. He knows السِّرُّ مَا أَخْفَى. He knows what's deeply embedded, the secret in our hearts, and what's even more subtle than that, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So this is a means by which we regulate our own behavior. Right? I can play games with some other people, I can play games with myself, I can trick and do all of these kind of things, but I can't play games with Allah. Allah hears everything. And there's no getting around it, subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second side to think about this from is the side of when I am in need and I am turning towards my Lord hears. Even when I'm not in need, my Lord hears. I mean, what do we do every single day when we pray? And we go down into ruku' and we come up from ruku' and we say, Sami Allahu liman hamidah. That Allah hears the one who praises Him. And if you think about it, what's amazing and beautiful is what happens actually in the beginning of the salah. First thing we do in the salah. We praise As-Thana, we praise Allah. And then when you start reading the Quran, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allah is, glory and praise to Allah. And then all of it is praise. And then we raise from the ruku', we say Allah hears the one who praises Him. Right? So Allah is hearing them. But Allah also hears the dua of the person, the calling of the person who is distressed. There's a story, and sometimes we don't always understand the response. And this is something that's very important to understand in our relationship with Allah. That sometimes we call upon Allah, and we turn to Allah, and we are determining the response that we want. And that's not submission. When we turn to Allah and we call to Allah, we wait to hear what is the response of Allah, and that response might not be what we're expecting. There's a story that Rumi tells. He says that there's a man who he used to call upon Allah every single night. And finally someone came to him and they said, "You're calling on Allah every night for all of these years. Have you ever heard once, I'm here to hear your call? Have you ever heard it? Have you ever heard it once?" And the man got kind of shook up, right? And he's like, you know what, he's right. And he goes to sleep that night and he sees a dream. And in the dream he sees Khidr, alayhi salam. He sees Khidr from the story of Musa and Khidr in Surah Al-Kahf. And they say that Khidr is supposed to represent the voice of God, in a sense. Like in the story of Surah Al-Kahf, Khidr has knowledge that Musa alayhi salam doesn't have, right? So they say that he represents this in the dream. And he tells him, basically, they have a conversation, and he tells him, you've been calling and you've been asking, and I've been responding by continuing to give you circumstances that get you to call upon me. And I've been responding by continuing to give you the inspiration to call upon me. And I've been responding by keeping you in this, like basically that you're still calling is a response that I actually heard you're calling. Because I'm still, Allah is controlling the heart. So Allah hears when we call upon Him. So this is point number one. Point number two of the hearing is that we must learn how to hear and listen to ourselves. And one of the disasters and diseases of modern society is that there's so much noise that we can't hear anymore. I'm sure there's people in this sermon right now, no matter how hard I try to keep your attention, I can't keep your attention. And you say, well, maybe if it was a better khutbah, so maybe, but most likely not. To be honest with all of us, right? Because there's so much noise in our lives so regularly that we can't listen anymore. And the place where we really can't listen is we don't even hear ourselves anymore. And there's a lot of wisdom in Proverbs that people say. The old proverb, when there's too much noise going on, someone will say, I can't even hear myself think. And there's wisdom in that proverb. Sometimes there's so much noise we can't even hear ourselves think. And then we can't hear that our body is communicating to us. Our mind is communicating to us. Our heart is communicating to us. There's an interview I was just listening to from Ariana Huffington, the founder of Huffington Post, right, this famous news source. And she was talking about what was the breaking point for her in her life and her personal well-being, was that she was with her daughter and they were touring universities. It was time to get accepted to universities. They're touring to universities. And the daughter told her that they have a rule that she can't use her BlackBerry or her phone, when she's with her on these tours. So they're going around, they tour, and then they go to the hotel at night, they sleep, and she would get out on her phone and start doing all the work that she needs to do. This is 2 years into the founding of the platform, right? The media platform. And she says after this whole trip, she comes back she was living in LA at that time, and she's totally exhausted, but she doesn't even realize she's exhausted. And this is, I think, so indicative of the human existence in the modern period. She's totally exhausted, has no idea that she's exhausted. And she says she goes to work and she's standing in front of the desk and she just passes out. Face first onto the desk. Right? Faints. Hits her face on the desk, needs stitches, everything is messed up. Goes to all of these specialists over the next 2 weeks to figure out what's wrong with her. Is it cancer? Is there a tumor? Is there this? Is there that? What is there brain issues going on? Turns out in the end, what's the problem? She's just exhausted. Our bodies communicate to us. To tell us, like, you need some sleep right now. And sometimes, yeah, we can't manage to do that. But sometimes we just need to make choices. That's important to me. That I need to get that sleep. The person who's interviewing here, he says, that happened to me too. Because I went through a period where I was writing a book. I would stay in a Thai restaurant all day long with unlimited iced tea. And I would drink a gallon or two of Thai iced tea a day. The whole time I was working on this book. And what happens to the body after that, right? So we need to learn how to listen to ourselves and hear ourselves. It's amazing, some of these people who are saying these things, then they write books about it, they become like the self-help experts, right? I mean, think about it. You have amazing statements from people from our tradition. You have a scholar, for example, who will say, I've watched the doors of my heart for the last maybe 40 years. And I didn't allow anything into my heart except that I knew it. So imagine that, like, how much awareness does the person have? The thoughts that are coming through their head, how much do I understand what is going on with me? Why do I feel tense in my neck? Why are my shoulders the way they are? My body is not functioning the way it's supposed to. That's all listening to ourselves. And the scholars, they say that once we start to limit this noise, and we start to listen to our hearts, we find that our hearts are, that inner voice, it's not just one. This is an addition that the Muslims have in this field. When people say, you have to listen to your inner voice. And your inner voice might not be the inner voice you want to listen to. The scholars, they said, it comes down to 4 different types of inner voices. There's Khawat al-Rahmaniyya, the divinely inspired inner voice. It's the one you want to listen to. And then there's khawatir malaikiyah, from the malaika, that they're angelic inspirations in the heart, you want to listen to them. And then there's khawatir nafsaniyah, that they're actually from the ego. You don't want to listen to them. Oh, they just don't respect you. They're not giving you the honor that you deserve. Nobody listens to you. All of these kind of things, right? And then there's khawatir shaitaniyah. There's khawatir that come from shaitan. But once we start to quiet that noise from the outside, then we can start to hear it. But one of the things we have to do is we have to adopt silence in our lives. It's very hard for people. There absolutely should be time in our day where there's silence. I'm not listening to anything. I'm not actively thinking about anything. That's it. I'm just taking a walk, and mashallah, the sky is beautiful. Or I'm just going to sit here right now, and I'm just going to sit here. And whatever comes, comes. Whatever doesn't come, but I'm just going to be for a little bit. Right? That's extremely, extremely important in our personal development. And the third category, inshallah, to listening is how we listen to one another. We'll talk about it in the second half of the khutbah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. I remind myself and everyone to have God consciousness in all affairs. A few announcements before we continue. Tonight, 7 p.m. onwards, we have the discussion with myself and the potluck dinner and social afterwards. And then tomorrow morning, we have the study circle from 7:30 to 9 a.m. Everyone is welcome. We're studying the book called Beginning of Guidance by Imam Ghazali. And we just started last month, so you're still relatively early if you decide to come. Alhamdulillah, we have a pretty good group. Also, Sheikh Sohail has a lecture series 6 weeks long on the Meccan period of the Prophet ﷺ's life. That's on Tuesdays from 7 to 8 p.m. Highly encourage people to go to that. And then the ongoing program. Sunday school, Sundays 10 to 1. Youth group, Sundays 11 to 1. Quran Institute, Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays 6 to 8. Men's Quran reading with Qari Talib, Wednesdays and Thursdays 8 to 9 p.m. And Saturdays after Fajr. And women's Quran reading with Qari Talib as well, Fridays from 10 to 12. So we spoke about listening and being heard, and how that can kind of play out in our relationship with Allah, how that plays out in our relationship with ourselves, and then of course we have to think about how that plays out in our relationships with everyone else. And there's 3 major barriers to being able to listen to people that I'm just going to focus on because there's many of them. The first barrier, interestingly enough, is the second point that we talked about. Is that if we're not able to hear ourselves, we're not going to be able to listen properly to someone else. And I'm telling you this as someone who spends most of their professional life listening to people. That's basically what I do. It's really hard, especially after the first half an hour. You know, after the first hour, after the first hour and a half, when you're going on like 3 hours straight of listening to people. And this one has a problem with their family, and this one has doubts about Islam, and this one has relationship issues, and all of these different things are going on. To actively and focus and listen to the person is very challenging. The only way you can actually do that for extended periods is if you actually hear yourself. So you start feeling like, man, I'm really tired right now. Okay, at least I can acknowledge that, and now I can focus on listening to the person. For some reason, I don't want to hear this person. Okay, I need to deal with that, and now I'm going to focus and listen to this person, right? But having that internal conversation is really important. Not so much so that you stop paying attention, but enough so that you're aware of yourself, right? So you might come home from work, and your spouse wants to talk to you, and you realize you're not listening to anything that they're saying. And that's because you didn't actually leave work yet. Like your body left work, but your head is still at work. So having that realization is the first part of being able to listen. The second thing that stops us from being able to listen to people is that we're always in a rush, which relates to kind of the second point as well. It's very interesting that the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that an ajla min ash-shaytan. In the first half of the hadith, وَالتَّأَنِّي مِنَ الْإِيمَانِ. The deliberation And attention is from belief. And haste is from shaitan. Haste is from shaitan. What's interesting about this expression is that you can move fast and not be hasty. It's very important to understand this. You can move fast and not be hasty. Being hasty is more of an issue of the heart. That the heart's in a rush. It's not calm. So it's hard to listen to other people because I'm rushing all over the place. And that also, again, it's a consequence of the modern world that we live in. A third major barrier to being able to hear people is that sometimes we struggle to hear people because we don't pay attention to language anymore. And this is another challenge of modern existence. You know, grammar is being kind of sidelined. The importance of words is being sidelined. So you start to say something to people and they don't actually understand what you're saying because they don't care enough about words to pay attention to the words that are being used. And this is a major departure from the history of Muslims. Right? The history of Muslims is that Muslims care deeply about words. Why? Because our entire thing is based on words. The Quran is the Word of God. It's literally the Word of God. And so when we hear words, we care about them. And that's why Muslim scholars throughout history, they do a number of things. One of them is that any conversation in Arabic, you're defining words. What does this word mean? What does it not mean? Right? Otherwise we get mixed up. You'll see also that people, they speak multiple languages, right? Islam didn't only exist in Arabic-speaking environments, as we all know. But Arabs, Muslims would also manage and to have expertise in the languages that are spoken natively. And they write poetry. They contribute to the literature. They contribute to the scholarly tradition of that place. All of it occurs, right? Because there's a concern for words. Having a concern for words helps me to determine what am I going to say to someone. And it helps the person who's listening to understand what is being said. And when you have to start saying too much in order to get the point across, it just gets kind of tiresome, right? Of course, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is not to use a lot of words. And to use so few words. Aisha radiallahu anha, she says the Prophet used to speak with so few words that you could count them. You can say, okay, that sentence had 13 words. Right? You can know, this is it. And this is what I'm going to get. The other thing about using too many words is that listening and hearing is also related to action. Too many words, you end up not doing anything. That's why I'm looking at my watch, I'm like, when is this khutbah going to end? But we still have more time. And if I stop too early, then people are going to complain that they weren't able to catch the salah. There's no way that it goes. But the words matter. This is number 3. Number 4, and the final point on this, is not about the barrier between us and communicating and listening to one another. But it's about how do we actually do that in a positive sense. And one of the most important things that's related there is that we have to learn to listen and lead with the heart. The Prophet ﷺ led with the heart. Before he hears your words, he's hearing what's going on with you in there. That's why you have all these hadith where the Prophet ﷺ would put his hand on someone, they say that the doubts went away. I think last month when we told the story of the man who came to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ, and he says, I creeped up so close to him, I was right behind him, and I just needed to pull out my sword and kill him. And the Prophet, and he says, and my heart was struck with fear, and I jumped back. And the Prophet ﷺ turned around and he told me, come closer, so-and-so. He said, come closer. And he takes a step closer, the Prophet ﷺ puts his hand on him, and he says, and I swear by Allah that when I lifted my eyes up and I looked at his face, he was more beloved to me than my ears and my eyes. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There's no words being exchanged. He just understands. That's leading with the heart. Communicating with the heart. One of the biggest things when we're sitting with someone, when someone's communicating with us, is to understand. They tell you to actively listen to what they're not saying, all this kind of stuff. Basically, listen to their heart. What's actually going on with this person? One of the things that does for us is that it helps us in our communications with one another, but it also helps us to understand communication that goes even beyond how we deal with human beings. Right, think about it. Everything is communicating to us. You might walk by an animal, that animal is communicating something, and its posture, and what it's doing, and how it responds to your presence. Right? The earth is communicating to us. It's saying to us that it's sick because we've been abusing it. Right? It's telling us that. It's telling us that through all kinds of indicators. But are we able to listen? The Prophet ﷺ, I was just reminded of this hadith recently because I came across it again, and I'll close with it. Which is that the Prophet ﷺ, he passed by a camel one time. Right? And the camel started to kind of like whimper a little bit. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he put his hand on the camel. And he paused, and then he said, "Whose camel is this?" And someone said, like, this is my camel. And he said, "Have taqwa of Allah in the way that you deal with your animal. Because I walk by and the camel is telling me that you're abusing it." Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In the case of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we believe that this is actually just miraculous, that he actually completely understood what the animal said. But is it not possible to understand that? Is it not possible to look at someone's dog and know that they're mistreating their dog, regardless of whether or not we think, all of that stuff, we don't mistreat animals? To not know that they're mistreating their animal? Isn't it possible to come into someone and know that something's wrong in their relationship with their family? To go into an elderly care center and know that this person is being abused before they even say anything? Right? There's indicators. But the noise has to be stopped so that we can hear. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us people of insight. Oh Allah, forgive us of our sins and our shortcomings, accept from us our deeds. Make us people who hear with ears that are able to understand and hearts that are able to comprehend. Oh Allah, give food to those who are hungry. Give shelter to those who are shelterless. Give victory to those who are oppressed. Give aid to those who are struggling with all kinds of hardships, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, make us people who are truly sensitive in the sense that we understand and know our senses. And aware of ourselves so that we can hear ourselves and hear others, and so that we can be aware of your responses to us, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, help us and give us knowledge that benefits us and forgive us for our shortcomings. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا واسرافنا في امرنا وثبت اقدامنا. اللهم بارك فينا وبيننا والف بين قلوبنا وصفوفنا. اللهم كن معنا ولا تكن علينا. انصر اخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان. افتح علينا فتح يا عظيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا صالحا. اللهم تقبل منا واعف عنا واتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا واقيموا الصلاه.